Servus, and welcome back to another episode of the Pro Hockey Pod, episode 6. We're just buzzing them out right now. Seems to be going pretty well week to week. This week we have a special guest on. To be quite honest, one of my close friends. We grew up together, uh, scrummed it out through the minor hockey ranks, and both went on to have our own little interesting adventures, both in college and university. And both of us conveniently now have gotten into the coaching side. Obviously, I'm in Europe, and Mark back in Ontario, there in Burlington. But welcome to the podcast, good friend of mine, Mark Corbett.
Thanks for having me, buddy. And you touched on a couple of good ones there, so I can't wait to get going here.
Yeah, we got lots to talk about. As I always as I always start off, like I like hearing about the kind of beginning. Obviously I know you grew up in Burlington, sorry. Is that where you first like learned to play hockey, kind of fall in love with the game?
Yeah. Burlington has a Timbits program here, and funny enough, some of the guys I started Timbits hockey with when I was 4 or 5 ended up playing my whole minor hockey career with. So it was pretty cool, and then jumped into the Eagles, the Burlington Eagles right away, and AAA most of my life. I dropped down to AA for a couple of years there, which was a lot of fun and taught me a lot about myself, and even at a young age, and I think actually brought my confidence back. And then moved up and was fortunate enough to play with you guys, minor midget and midget and stuff. So it was, it was awesome. Burlington, born and raised, and kind of was a Burlington Eagle my whole life. So it's a great organization, and funny enough, which I'm sure we'll circle back on, is where I'm back to nowadays.
Once an Eagle, always an Eagle. And you brought up a really good point. Last week's guest, John Whitelock, brought it up as well. So, obviously we kind of met each other through hockey, and then obviously went to high school together and stuff like that. And there was a point where, we played AAA together, and then you went back down to the double A level. And I spoke to John last week about this, and I find it's very misinterpreted, I would say, with, people are striving for those 3 letters. So in Ontario, it's AAA, that's the highest level. And you touched on it yourself. Like, even though you went back to double A, which some people would have thought, oh, like that's not very good, it's kind of over. Like you kind of accepted and were like, hey, now I can work on my game. And you still had the dream of eventually going back to AAA. Can you just comment on that, and like how you kind of motivate yourself to pursue your dream of playing AAA again?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a mindset. I mean, there's definitely there's no doubt there's disappointment when you get that call. And I think even back then it might have been a letter. But yeah, you wait around for that call all the time. And then you find yourself going back to double A, which, in turn, I had some friends on that team too, and kids I grew up with. And I think that's a misconception, like you mentioned nowadays, is like, I mean, now that I'm coaching in the AAA world and stuff, is just the lengths that people will go to, or the disappointment, of getting cut. Right. And like I said, I went back. I think my first year we went to the OMHA semis, so it was like a great year. And then my second year in Double A, we went to the OHFs. So it was, it was. I mean, I'm sure if we maybe had a, not as good team, it might have changed my opinion on it. But for me, it was just motivation to get back up to AAA. And I think once you get over the disappointment, it's what mindset you want to have, right? You can kind of just accept, like, okay, I'm a double A player and that's that. Or, I had 2 years, I believe I was minor bantam, and, my goal was to get back up there by the draft year. And, I just worked hard, and kind of, that was the start of my kind of underdog story, we'll call it, but just trying to prove people wrong. Like, you made a bad decision, got called up a couple of games. I got to play with the AAA team. So it kept me interested. And obviously, like I said, having the success we did at the double A, kept me motivated to make that next jump. And, I think it just teaches you a lot, about what type of kid you are as well, too.
Well, and experiencing that, maybe perseverance or obstacles at a young age, I think helps develop people into the type of adult later in life that helps them succeed. And you brought up a good point. Like, it's not like when you went back to double A that you guys were winning 3 games a year. Like, you guys had a lot of players on that team that probably, if in other organizations, because back then it was especially hard to get releases to go to other minor hockey associations. I'm not sure what it's like today, but you guys had a lot of guys who could have probably been playing AAA. And as you said, you guys had a lot of success, the 2 years there, OMHAs, OHF. So that obviously allowed you to work on your game, but also play in those high pressure playoff tournament situations.
Well, that's it. Yeah. Like I learned a lot about myself and, like anything, you get cut, you get fired, whatever, you lose a little bit of self-motivation and just belief in yourself. Right. So I got down, the coaches were great. They kind of knew I was obviously disappointed coming back down at a young age. And, they kind of just took the reins off me and kind of allowed me to do what I did. And, I knew going back up to AAA eventually was going to be tough because there were some good defensemen there, and I knew I was going to kind of be behind them, which was fine. But it allowed me to grow as a player. Like I was playing, like you said, in all situations. I was playing in, and funny enough, it was still some of my best memories. I can recall the one OMHAs in Oshawa, and like I know exactly what happened. I know the score of the game. Like it's crazy, and I don't even know, 13 years old, 14 years old. And it was with a lot of friends and still friends to this day. So it teaches you a lot about it. I think this generation nowadays is a little bit different and they don't persevere as well, I guess you could say, or deal with, adversity as much. But back then, my parents were just kind of like, well, it's up to you what you want to do. If you want to work your way back up or if you want to just, be a AA player the rest of your life. So, they supported me, and then after that, it was kind of whatever mindset I wanted to have.
I remember both. I believe it was both years. Like we were in high school, and I remember going to your playoff games. Like you guys, I think you're the one year you played Tecumseh or something, and
Yeah,
I remember going to those games. Like it was during the week, and it was kind of like the thing to do was go support the Eagles and guys like yourself, Drew Fielding, people like that. So like, and it was still like the Central Arena was pretty packed for whatever we were 15-year-old AA hockey game. It was almost like a junior atmosphere, and I think that also adds into you know the the playing factor of got you guys up for those games and even motivated you and even more to succeed.
yeah, absolutely. Like I see it now with, I'm sure we'll get into it, but I coach U18 now, and when their high school buddies come and stuff like that, it's they get a little bit more energized, and I think we had our 1990 age group, I would say, was all pretty close, to be honest, like from AAA, AA, single A, all the way. When I got called up, it was like nothing changed. I wasn't the outside guy. Like we all buddies, like you said, we all went to school together. And then on the AA team, we all went to different schools, but we all were friends with the AAA guys. Like it was no, wasn't much of I think nowadays it's almost more of a status, where for us it was just a letter, right? Like you mentioned. So it was, no, we had a really, really fun age group, and a lot of us are still kind of friends to this day, which is kind of cool. And whether we see each other all the time or whether we see each other once a year, so we pick up right where we left off.
For sure. And I was just thinking, like, I would have hate to have been one of those coaches back then, having to make these decisions because, as you said, it's not like, the AAA team. I don't know how many guys we have. Say we have 18 guys. So you take 6 defensemen. It wasn't like we had six and then, there was a huge gap between, 7, 8, 9, 10 or whatever who went down to AA. Like it was every year, you can make a debate depending, especially on how camps went, how the previous year went. Like, could this person switch in for this person? So I think, like you said, that's a testament to the Burlington minor hockey system one, and also our age group, like the 1990 age group, like one of the better age groups for sure.
Yeah, and I think it's across the board too. Like that whole age group, even, I mean, as we know, some of the players we played against in minor hockey and stuff like that, like it was just a strong age group, I think, that year. And I think that's just a common factor sometimes, is every year is a different, strength. And I think our year was just a tough one. And like I said, like both teams always had success, whether it was AAA, AA, whatever it was. Is like you said, at any given year you could have, intertwine, maybe one piece here, one piece there, or like you said, kind of comes down to a flip of a coin of who you're taking. So it was a lot of fun. We had a great group, all the way up AAA, AA. And like I said, we're all friends to this day, which is something cool. And I try and instill in some of our guys is that, it's lifelong friends, whether, like I said, you hang out all the time or you see each other once in a while.
One other thing I wanted to ask you about before we move on from the minor hockey path is, you played 2 years of midget, and again, this is something I don't know how it is now. You would know more than me. We can cover that part of it later. But when we were playing at that age, it was always, hey, if you can do 1 year and then go off to junior, go off to the OHL, whatever it is, guys are always trying to race out of there. Where someone like yourself, and also the guest I talked to last week who ended up playing 2 years as well, I believe it's better for development. Like you're able to constantly work on your skills, work on your leadership as well, because you were always a strong spoken person. And I know you guys had a really good team that year. It seemed like every tournament you guys went to, you either won or lost in the finals. So I feel like that would have definitely helped you for transitioning, the following year into junior.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, first year midget, you play with a second age group. I think that year, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we probably had a half and half mix of second year guys and first year guys. So again, you're still kind of behind, you're out of the shadows of maybe the draft now, but now you're still behind, a couple older guys and whatever. And then, yeah, my second year back, we had a good core come back, and then I just took off that year. Like that was my year to like be like, okay, I'm the older guy now. Like I'm gonna be a leader and I'm gonna show everyone. And yeah, like obviously it helped. We had a very, very successful team. I think we were ranked, one in Ontario, three in Canada most of the year. Like it was pretty crazy. And yeah, it teaches you a lot. And again, yeah, like you said, we'll probably get into it, but it's something that, I'm starting to see now that I'm coaching this age group. I'm starting to see a lot of guys come back now and kind of, and sometimes I tell my story and, they like to look me up because I think my last year in midget's on there, but, no, it just gets you ready. You play in the right situations. You play in those high pressure situations. You get your call ups, which is great. Like I remember I was getting called up to the Cougars at that point and stuff like that. So it does help you, but I think it's just, in my opinion now and what I see nowadays is it just allows you to play and not sit on the bench, right? And that's the biggest thing for kids these days. That I think the problem is nowadays, without getting into it too much, is kids kind of chase the status of, what they're putting on their Instagram saying junior A and blah, blah, blah. But if you're not playing, then like, what's the point of putting that status, right? So that's kind of where I had that was a blast of a year. Like we went out to Kelowna again. That's where we started, having fun. We went both years, but yeah, like you said, we were winning tournaments left, right, and center. I don't even know what our record was that year, but it just got me again another confidence boost to get ready for junior and to kind of take over and make that next step.
And then you just mentioned that next step. Obviously, the next year you went and played junior B in Stony Creek, your first year of a full season of junior, tier 2 junior. Couple of things I want to touch on. So after that midget year, were you at all thinking, hey, could I go to an OHL camp? Because obviously, I've talked about this with a few other guests, is like when we were growing up, like the OHL was everything. And, we only really heard about NCAA from like, Mark Juris, like Josh's dad, stuff like that. Like I really wasn't familiar with it until playing Cougars and stuff. But was there any interest, that way of going to camps, or was it more like, hey, I'm going to go play tier junior, and obviously Stony Creek offered you the opportunity to do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, you still, like you said, like it still is kind of the mindset nowadays is that it's OHL or bust. And it's, to be honest, there's so many, like, and I'm sure we'll get into it once I tell my story, but like U Sports, like no one even knows probably still what that means. And like, it's like the hockey's unbelievable. So for me, it was, yeah, I would have liked to have another shot. Like what they've added, which is really nice, is they've added a U18 draft now. It's a small draft, 3 rounds, but I would have loved that back when I had it because I think it just gives motivation for guys to, play year a midget. Okay, I didn't get drafted, whatever, didn't go my way. Okay, now I have another chance to go there, right? Because some guys just mature at a different age and, strength, body size, like everything, right? So it was, yeah, and funny enough, and I don't even know if you know this story, but before I signed in Stony Creek, actually, I was out in Wellington with the Dukes, and I was literally billeting already there. And the night or two, and I actually think you might have played with this guy, and I'm trying to remember his name when he went down to Oswego, but I got cut or released the night before because the guy came back from Belleville, and that's why I kind of ended up in Stony Creek like late. I think I signed with them like mid-September, and I signed in on as like a 7th or 8th defenseman because at that time they were already full. I had already moved into my billets at Wellington. Like I remember I lived up in an attic almost. Like I remember the story to the day. And, the day before they're like, we're not going to billet a 6th, 7th defenseman, which I knew I had to put my time in. And yeah, I had to go home to Stony Creek. But yeah, that's kind of where it all started. It was in Stony Creek with Rick Natras, who I still run into these days, which is, if anyone knows him, he's was quite the player, won a Stanley Cup and stuff like that. So it was a great intro to junior hockey for me.
You want to talk a little bit about the difference back then? I mean, I'm not familiar with it now. I think it's obviously gained a lot more recognition, but I know back then, especially at least for NCAA teams and stuff, it was like if you weren't playing, in the OJHL or BCHL or all like the first tier two leagues, you know, they weren't really like scouting junior B in a sense. Like it's obviously I think changed now. I know a lot of guys who play junior B and are getting scholarships, but like how was it perceived back then in terms of playing in the GOJHL?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes back to like not knowing a lot about it, right? Like I think it was Andrew Dovey and someone else that were there actually, and that's the only reason I kind of knew about Stony Creek. And because, like you said, growing up, it was like OHL. Then if it wasn't OHL, it was Junior A, and then it was like, well, what do I do after Junior A, right? Like so, yeah, I didn't really have an opinion on Junior B until I got there, and then as the season went on, I'm like, okay, like there's guys here that you think of the Midwest or you think of the West divisions, right? Like those are kids that maybe just didn't want to move away from home for junior, right? So they were pretty strong teams out that way. I think that's when Sheehan and Levs got scholarships out of junior B too. So that kind of changed the tide a little bit. I don't know if they finished their career in junior B, but that's, kind of where they got their scholarships out of, or they're starting down in St. Catharines and stuff. And I think that changed the perception a little bit. And now I think, the way you look at it is, the top teams in junior B could, in my opinion, beat the bottom junior A teams, right? Like it's not that far off. And I think it's gained a lot of respect. I just actually watched highlights from literally last night, a couple games clinching to go to the Southern Cup. Like you're talking 3,000 fans in these small towns. Like you can't beat that. Like I'll never forget, we went to Sarnia in the Sutherland Cup round robin, and we got there at probably 4 o'clock for a 7 o'clock game, and the parking lot was packed, tailgating, whatever you name it. Like I've never played in a barn like that was that loud before. And I think that's a big thing, to be honest, is that they love their hometowns. They love their junior B hockey. They're passionate about it. And like I said, like that was some of the stuff I'll never forget about junior B. And I think, now the path to go out west, to be honest, is to play your junior B, and then it's easier to get out west after junior B than junior A, just because of the way they, make moves and trades and money and stuff is, I think the Kilties, for example, Hamilton Kilties have 2 or 3 guys going out west this year and stuff like that, right? So you just put your time in for a year, and then or a year or two, and then you head out there. So I think the reality of junior A is still there, but then top junior B teams is almost just as good.
Oh, I agree. And you touched on something that I think is kind of unique. Like on my path, like before I played Cougars, I went to Strathroy on just like a rookie camp or something, whatever. And I remember getting a tour of their barn, and it was like a barn when I say that, like small rink, but they packed it. And like I always thought that was cool. Like obviously I enjoyed my time in Burlington. We had a brand new rink, brand new dressing room, brand new gym. But because we switched sides of town, we're getting like 200, 250. Like, if we're playing Oakville or someone, then we're getting maybe 400, 500. And it was so small that it was decently packed. But then I think of these like small towns, like the Strathroys, I believe St. Mary, St. Thomas. Like you just hear of stories like that of like, this is the thing to do on the weekend. Like the whole town comes together, they go to these games. And as you said, like for it to be 4 o'clock in a parking lot to be just rammed tailgating, almost like NFL kind of mindset. Like I think that's something that, as you said, is underappreciated like about these leagues, and just like how the towns support them. And I wish there was a way, I don't even know how to say it, like to not create a super league, but a way to where you can kind of like, every year you do maybe some crossover games or something, or just like kind of get exposure. So like, these bigger teams can say, hey, these are what these small town teams do, and vice versa.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's sometimes just condensing the leagues, right? Like there's so many teams out there. If you can condense the leagues, it just brings in more fans, right? Because then they travel a little bit further and stuff like that. But yeah, no, I remember like even the Bentavinas, Rob was, a year younger than us, but his brother played for Thorold. And I remember like him being like, hey, like we got to go down to a Thorold game, we got to go early. I'm like, what do you mean we got to go early? He's like, oh, it's gonna be sold out. I'm like, what? And then like when I played in the junior B, we played Thorold. I think we played them in the playoffs, and maybe the first round or second round. And same thing, like showed up at 4:30 on the bus. People already had their like blankets laid out, saving seats. I was like, what is going on here? And even for us in like Valley Park Arena, for those that know it, it's not a big barn. And I remember when we played, I don't know if it was Niagara in the finals, and funny enough, I think even you and Juris were there the one game, but like the place was ramped, like people sitting in the walkways, people up on like wherever they could, like 1,000 people in a barn that probably holds like 400. Like it was crazy, and that's, you know, I had such a different view on junior B hockey after that year, and obviously we had a lot of success, but you know, and good coaching, but you know, I had so much more respect for that league after, you know, not that I didn't before, but just a different outlook on, you know, the difference between junior B and junior A. And now I'm kind of going through with my guys, guiding them in the right direction. And I always tell them, like, you know, top tier junior B teams, there's no reason not to go there.
Oh, for sure. And like you just raised a good point. It's, you can think, you can have opinion on a league, but until you've actually played in it, um, you know, we'll touch on that later.
Mhm.
Obviously we briefly played together in Fayetteville in the SP.
Yeah.
But then, so after this year in Stony Creek, you made the jump to Tier 2 Junior A. So you in the OJHL. So you played 1 year in Couchiching and then 1 year in Oakville. When you're playing these years, obviously you've made it to the top tier junior in Ontario. Like, you know, the next step would be either OHL or you're starting to think about school. What was your thinking process in terms of, you know, CIS U Sports versus NCAA D1 or D3? Like, what was kind of going through your head during these times?
Yeah, when I moved up to Couching, that was kind of like, you know, just thought it was a cool experience to move away. I actually got to, you know, bill it with my uncle who's now passed, but you know, it was probably honestly the most fun I had to this day, that group that we had up there, and living close to Barrie, and half the guys built it there. But yeah, like kind of like, yeah, you know, you made that next step in your career and you're like, you know, proud of yourself. And again, we kind of had a good year. That was that year that we kind of did that little weird split of, I don't know what it was, whatever. Anyways, but yeah, there was a North Division again, kind of fun up in the North. Like Huntsville had good crowds, Collingwood was still there, so they had good crowds. Now that, you know, now they're back and kind of doing the same thing. So a lot of fun up there. And then kind of like when I was up there, I was taking some part-time college courses, thinking like, okay, you know what, at this point I've had a good, you know, good college or a good junior run, and you know, maybe play one more year and then I'll just go to school. You know, like I hadn't really, to be honest, I didn't really thought about school in that coaching year because I was just, you know, as far as playing there. But and then kind of after that year, coaching folded, so we were kind of free agents, allowed to go wherever. And you know, I was fortunate enough that I had, when I was playing with Stony Creek, I had AP'd with Oakville a bunch. So they knew who I was, and they're like, well, why don't you just come home and play your 20-year-old year here? Same thing. Then they were moving into a new barn, which is 16 Mile now, which was an amazing facility. And that's kind of where I started to think, okay, maybe I can do something. And you know, NCAA was, yeah, for sure the goal at that point. But you know, again, it's not easy, right? Like dime a dozen go there, and you know, pretty tough. So I had a lot of D3 interests that year, which, you know, again, wasn't sure what I wanted to do. You know, could I make a career? You know, should I just go to school and, you know, get an education up here and then work? And then funny enough, like you mentioned U Sports, I didn't even really know what it was until I want to say it was October, November of my 20-year-old year. And you know, coach came in, he's like, Corbs, you know, someone wants to talk to you out here. I was like, okay, cool, whatever. You know, thought maybe my mom or dad or something, you know. And guy introduced himself. He's like, hey, I'm Graham Wise from Ryerson University. And I'm sitting there almost like, okay, cool. Like, you know, what are we talking about here? And he's like, you know, we play U Sports, and I know the leagues have changed, you know, a couple times over the years, but in the OUA. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So what's all this about? And then, yeah, it kind of like, to be honest, from that day, I started like Googling, like, you know, the league and all this stuff. I'm like, oh, okay, this is actually like, you know, OHL guys go there after their, you know, their career, use their school packages. I'm like, oh, I guess, you know, pretty cool opportunity if I can play a couple more years, right? Again, still wasn't really thinking much of my hockey career, but I was like, if I can play and go to school and get an education, I'm like, this is a kind of a win-win situation. So yeah, that was kind of like, to be honest, my 20-year-old year, like October, November was the first time I was even introduced to U Sports. And you know, again, like you said, playing in a league, and now you have the utmost respect for it. And I think that's only growing as well too in Ontario here. And I mean, obviously out west and out east, they're pretty predominant programs. And yeah, it was pretty funny. Like you said, not even having a clue about it. And to this day, I bet you people don't even know about it still.
A lot to comment on that there. No, I was just so like a couple of things. So one, I talked about this with Mike Uza, so I had on I think 2 episodes ago. Like he obviously went to University of New Brunswick, and same thing. Like when he was growing up, he played in the OHL, and it was like, once you go CIS, it's like, okay, it's terrible hockey. You're done. Get your degree. Good luck in life. And I think even when we were playing, that was still the perception of it. Everyone was kind of thinking maybe down on it compared to NCAA. Um, for those listening, like I played both NCAA Division 1 and Division 3. Division 1, they have the scholarships. It's great if you can get that. You get your school paid for. Division 3, especially, I'm not sure how it is now, but when I transferred, the year I transferred my sophomore year was the last year that they offered financial help for sport. So my junior and senior year, unless you have an academic scholarship for obviously your schoolwork, which I was not going to get, um, you're paying full price for this, and it's a lot of money, and that's something that I remember. I think it was Daniel Savelli's dad. I saw him. This would have been when you were playing there. I think my assistant coach was there, and you were playoffs against Burlington when you guys were playing them against in Oakville. And I remember talking to Daniel Savelli's dad, and I was like, "Hey, like, so what's Daniel doing after? Like, is he thinking of going somewhere?" And he was like, "Yeah, he's going to go CIS." And I just had asked him. I said, "Hey, has he ever thought about D3? I think it'd be great for him too." And then his dad was like, Andrew, like it's a lot of money. And it was something that I was like, yeah, like, people don't know that. Like they think it's the same as D1. Like here's your scholarship, here's your full ride. And that's sometimes that also is the factor because, not saying that CIS is cheap, but it's definitely cheaper than going D3 in the States.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's a financial cost, right? And it's like you said, I think it's been taken away. I think there's some like, financial aid based on maybe what you're, still some schools like what you kind of make, and then yeah, into academics. But yeah, you don't see as many kids going D3 as you used to, like back when I think we played. Like it was everyone was like, Oswego, Plattsburgh, like you name it, we were going to it, right? Because it was kind of very similar, like you said. And then yeah, I think it's changed now, and now I think it's made it even tougher because U Sports and stuff. You don't see many tier 2 junior A guys unless you're top of the top 20-year-olds like going to that league because it's all XOHL guys now.
No, for sure. Another thing I want to talk about. So obviously this coach comes and talks to you about Ryerson University. I believe they have a different name now, but I'm just going to call them Ryerson for the sake of this. Was there any other schools that had showed interest, or like did you go visit Ryerson and you were like, hey, like I want to go here. I could see myself doing my school here and also playing hockey here.
Yeah, I talked to a couple other schools, like I think Brock back then, Laurier, and then even like RMC and stuff like that. And yeah, like it's and then I got the tour of kind of Ryerson, and I did have to tough it out one year at George Bell, which you'd have to Google, everyone would, but I knew they were moving into Maple Leaf Gardens, and at that point I was kind of like, okay, like didn't even think I was playing hockey after junior, and now I can say I played in Maple Leaf, like the old Maple Leaf Gardens, and have the same rafters and all this stuff. And that was kind of when, over that year, the probably next couple months, I was kind of like, okay, like, what's NCAA D3? I'd gone on a lot of visits there, Fredonia, Morrisville, couple other ones at that point. And I'm like, okay, like, what am I going to do after school? Like, am I going to keep playing or am I just going to go work? So I was like, well, at this point, I'll just get a Canadian education that's recognized a little bit more. I'm not saying they're not in the States, but then yeah, I went on that tour at Ryerson and I was just like, you know what, like let's give this a shot. If it works for a couple of years, great. If it doesn't, and ended up working out for 4 years, and yeah, it was an awesome experience. And living downtown Toronto was an eye opener as well. So yeah, no, it was yeah, I had a lot of respect for, like I said, like after that kind of conversation, I did a lot of Googling and I was like, oh, some pretty good players. And funny enough, guys we grew up with that had 4-year OHL stints and stuff were like kind of now coming into the same league like I was in. So it's kind of like, that was like a bit of a, pat on the back for myself, right? Being like, well, hey, like, different paths, but we kind of made it to the same league at the end of the day.
Everybody has different paths. You brought up a good point. So that first year, I remember I came and watched you at that rink. Like For those who do not know where this rink is, it is the opposite side of where the school is. So you're going whatever it was a 30-minute, 40-minute commute through Toronto traffic to get to this rink. Because of this, you guys obviously didn't have a lot of fans in that rink when I was there. There wasn't many, but I think that also just talks to the dedication of the guys who went there, because you know doing this commute every day for practice, so how many 4 days a week plus 1 to 2 times for a game, like it's not easy. Not everybody has cars. Some guys are probably taking public transit. Toronto is obviously not the best place to drive either, because there's so many people on the road. That just, as I said, is a testament to these guys, whether they went on and played after or not. It was just enjoying that full experience and enjoying playing, youth sports hockey.
Yeah. It was like, okay, here's your, financial student athlete help, and then here's your TTC card, which is the Toronto Transit card. And I was like, oh, okay. And they're like, yeah, you got to get up to the rink somehow. I was like, what the heck? So, the cool part about Ryerson was when I went in my first year, they kind of like not really cleared house, but they brought in I want to say 12 or 13 freshmen. So we kind of all had to like learn it together. And it was kind of like the fun part about it is we had like a large freshman class or first year class. And that kind of made it funny too. Like we had to, yeah, like subway up, subway across, jump on a bus. Like it was, and you had to time it. Like that was the other thing. It wasn't even like it was just like, you can go whenever you want. You're like, okay, if I can hit this bus and then whatever. But yeah, like you said, like we all knew what was coming with the Maple Leaf Gardens, but it was a grind for the first year. But wouldn't change it. Like you said, like a lot of adversity, a lot of, whatever. And away teams hated to come play us. So that was great. It was a positive, but yeah, Toronto was crazy for driving and stuff. So a lot of time spent on the subway and the TTC buses, to say the least, that year.
Another thing I wanted to ask you about. So when you think of university, it doesn't matter where, Canada, US, you think of a campus. You think of having dorms on a campus, cafeterias, all the school buildings together. I know that's, at least in a lot of the schools I saw in the States, that's how it's kind of structured. I know there's some places where they'll be in a big city, but I remember when I came and visited you the one time and we went out, and I was like, okay, so you live in this apartment building on floor like 23, and we have to take a 10-minute taxi to go to this grocery store, which is it's just technically campus. And then later that night, we took another taxi to this bar. Like, can you kind of comment on, like, I mean, I'm sure it was fun at times. I'm sure sometimes it got annoying, but like not having the traditional, college campus experience.
Yeah, no, it's something I talk to people about all the time, right? Like we had one quad like right in the middle of the city, and then, which had a lot of classrooms. But then, yeah, like you said, like I had classes in the movie theater, like no joke. Like I would be in and worse too, 8 a.m.er, you're in those nice, comfy movie seats. I had economics too, which was a bore fest. So like I was like, it was hard to stay awake. Like it was, yeah, it was unique. You had classrooms that were in random buildings that, you're walking, it's like store, boom, stairwell up to a classroom. And you're like, what the heck? Like, where am I here? So I think it's changed a bit now. They've added some buildings, like I know TMU building now, like there's a really nice Rogers business building now and stuff. But yeah, same thing. It's still in the middle of like, you got the Eaton Center, and then you got the school right beside it, like, a random building that's all the classes there. So that's one thing I or I did miss, I guess you could say, is that kind of that campus, like, and like yourself, like we went into school or similar to you, but, we went into school at 20 years old too, right? So we didn't get the whole like dorm, like, all that chaos experience as well too. So yeah, it was kind of weird. No like student housing. You're not bunked up with 6 guys, like, so I did a lot of school visits that year or over those 4 years to like Brock and Guelph. I had buddies there, just to kind of get that feel. But at the same time, people liked coming to Toronto to visit and party and stuff like that. So it's one thing, if I could go back on, probably would like to have that kind of campus life feel, dorms, whatever, but still wouldn't change kind of my path for anything.
Yeah, it was, as I said before, it was definitely funny visiting you. You really, like, just to say it bluntly, you didn't feel like you were in university. Like I felt like you were just like living in an apartment and you had a job, like that's just how it was. But as you said, it kind of prepared you. I think prepared you for, life, like, what you're doing now, like a lot of driving around, sometimes big cities, sometimes small cities, having to, time management, different travel methods. So it definitely at that age, 20 to 23, definitely prepared you for the real world. And I think almost in a sense, you were more prepared for the real world than like maybe in my case, because it's like, I lived in a bubble for 4 years. It's fake life. You got this college town, everything's taken care of, like food, school, hockey, whatever. Like, then you get out and it's like a shell shock, where to you, you were already kind of one foot into the real world in a sense with living and stuff. So it probably ended up preparing you better and helping you adjust easier than maybe someone in a campus situation.
Yeah, no, like I mean, like where I lived, it was like, one street that way, one street this way. Like you saw different things every day. And, when we did our, like you said, compared to other schools, like when we did our, kids programs and stuff like that, these kids were coming from, low income housing, and, they would walk to the rink on their own at like night. Like it was just, to be honest, it taught me a lot, and also just showed me like a whole different, world that I have respect for now, that we had life pretty good, and we do have life pretty good, and we kind of got to see the other side of it, and we did what we could. But yeah, like we were living in a city and going to school is what I kind of say, and a lot of, I think, other kids would say the opposite. Like we went to school and we were in the city of Guelph or whatever it was, right? So yeah, it made you grow up fast, and had to be, you lived in a big city, and literally the term "see something new every day," like you saw something new every day, whether it was good or bad. But no, it makes you grow up fast for sure.
After these 4 years in downtown Toronto, you decided you were gonna try the North American grind, I would say. Obviously the SPHL, so it's one below the East Coast. And for those who think the ECHL is a grind, the SP ain't much better. And we'll touch on it. Like the travel in this league is crazy depending on what team you're on. Sometimes you're on a bus for like 18 hours. Obviously, the money isn't, you're not there to make a living. It's more to like grind away and hopefully make your way up and just, play pro hockey. Luckily for you, like your first year, you kind of entered into a good experience. So, you get on Knoxville eventually, and you guys end up winning a championship. You want to just talk about that, like your first half a season pro hockey, you end up being a champion.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. Like you said, I eventually got there. Yeah, it was kind of a, again, kind of, you go through your 4 years of school, you don't really know about the next level. You don't know guys leave like right after their season's done. So kind of my fourth year, that started coming up a little bit, like, because in U Sports too, you kind of can play 5 years. So I had decided to play just four and get out of there. And then yeah, I had some buddies down in the SP, and they're like, what are you doing? A couple guys that actually went to Adrian College and stuff and played against you, and they're like, what are you doing after school? I'm like, I don't know, writing exams and like gonna go find a summer job. Like, what are you doing? They're like, well, why don't you come down and play? And I'm like, well, is that a thing? They're like, yeah, like leave right after your last playoff game and let's go. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So yeah, like luckily I was in a program where my professors, like we were in a pretty small program, so they all knew who I was, and kind of just cleared it with them. I'm like, hey, I got this opportunity to go down to the States to finish out my last couple months of hockey, but also school. Like, can I write my exams when I'm down there? Like, get them proctored down there. And they're like, yeah, like that's awesome. Like, and they didn't even really know a lot about hockey, but they were like, yeah, sure, go for it. Like, because I had a lot of written exams too, which I could have just submitted. And yeah, so I kind of had two teams interested in me, Mississippi and Knoxville, and I had some buddies kind of on both teams, and you know, kind of had to flip a coin there. And funny enough, went down to Mississippi, and because I took a couple extra days to make a decision, they had also brought another guy in at the same time, and told Knoxville I wasn't coming, and went down to Mississippi for a hot cup of coffee and a couple weeks of a 3-gamer, and they decided to keep another defenseman over me. So at that point I was like, okay, that was sweet. Like maybe I should just go back now. And I had two pretty good buddies on Knoxville, and they're like, dude, just come over. I'm like, dude, the coach, like I already told the coach no like 2 weeks ago. He's not gonna take me in or whatever. And anyways, he's like, well, give it a shot. So I was like, whatever. And funny enough, we had played Knoxville, I think one of my 3 games, and then like one of the first couple of games when I did get to Knoxville was against Mississippi again. So it was kind of a funny tale, but yeah, I called Mike Cragen in Knoxville, and who's an Ontario guy. And I just said, "Hey, man, like straight up, I made a mistake. My bad. Can I still come?" And he's like, "Yeah, drive on over." So yeah, picked up a car, rented a car, and boom, I was in Knoxville, played that night. And then, kind of Cinderella story. We saw Mississippi in the finals and won. And that was honestly, man, like playing in Knoxville, the weather's unbelievable. Wrote my exams at the University of Tennessee, like, which is, I mean, another story in itself, but country style town, which I like. And yeah, it was cool. Like, and just, I played, my captain was 13-year pro and I never won a championship. And I was fortunate enough just to literally come out of school for 2 months and win a championship. So it really just shows you the grind, like you mentioned, of some of these guys that played like 13, 14, 15 years of pro and never won anything. And I was fortunate enough to kind of, 2 months in, win my first pro championship. And Knoxville was unreal. Like the fans were, again, you talk about getting there early. Like we're walking down to the back door at 4 o'clock, and the runways lined with fans. The place was. I still go back, to be honest, and watch on YouTube the call of the overtime goal to win it, and like the place was just 4,000, 5,000 people, in a place that's like all about football and like basketball, like like Knoxville Ice Bears. They're like, what's that? Like we're going to we're hanging out in the pool by the time we're playing the playoff, shorts and a t-shirt. That's how nice the weather was. So yeah, I was very, very fortunate to win a championship, and they're hard to come by, as we all know. So very fortunate, and something I'll never forget too.
Well, as you said, it's pretty, there's that one player that had been playing 13 years and never won anything. And you obviously, 2 months in or whatever it is, a month in your pro career, have a championship. So it's all about, sometimes timing and, kind of some luck of being put in good situations. Obviously went to Mississippi first, and then you end up going to Knoxville, which ended up being the right decision. And I think, having the ability to win something like that, your first year pro, and you kind of experience, what it's like to be on top, kind of allows you to set the bar for, the next couple of years that you obviously played in that league, because you've seen like the ultimate, you know what I mean? Like it's different if you go in and, you play on a team that doesn't win and you guys are terrible, don't make playoffs, then it's kind of like, okay, well, hopefully next year we make playoffs. Where now it's, hey, we won a championship. Like that's my goal. I'm now known as a SPHL champion. Like that's on my resume. So your next 2 years there, I'm sure, your mindset was, okay, let's help a team for a full season. Let's go win another one.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, I think back and you watch all these, the NHL Stanley Cup, you watch the American League, you watch the East Coast, and in that moment, you don't really care what league you're in. Like the dressing room's tarped off the same way. The beer cart looks the same in the middle of the room. The champagne bottles pop the same. Like it's something that it's not like I go around saying I was an SPHL champion. I just said, yeah, I won a championship in a pro league. Like in that moment, you don't care. The fans don't care. No one cares. You're drinking moonshine. Like you're in the South. Like it's just, I think that's something people don't realize, is that they're like, wow, like, I don't want to go down to that league. But I'm like, when you win a championship, you're a champion for life. It doesn't matter. Like, Frank, we were still in the Hockey Hall of Fame, in the SP with hosting the cup, right? Like I think that's a misconception of these leagues and titles and letters and all this stuff, is like, to win a championship is hard at any league, any level, any sport. And I think that's what I took away from it. Like you said, is just, that was my mindset after that, was like, hey, like I know what it took. I saw what it took. And, to be honest, I wasn't even a top guy there. Like I was playing a role, and I saw what it took to get there. And it was incredible.
Well, everybody, that's the key to winning, is everyone's a different piece to the puzzle. And I think that's sometimes forgotten. They think just, okay, we're going to put the best scoring team together. Well, that's not how you win in playoffs. You need everybody having their role. You need some defensive guys, and you guys who are going to finish the body, play tough, kind of stuff like that. But I wanted to just kind of say as well, like, you're talking about like the misconception. Well, to be quite honest, a lot of people, like, when they go to these leagues, like, they're not delusional. They're not like, hey, I'm gonna go to the SP and I'm gonna make a living off this. Like it's to go because you love the game. You want to go play pro, have fun, experience, different states, different countries, whatever it is. Obviously, we played together briefly in Fayetteville for I think it was 2 weekends I was there. And like I'll be quite honest, like I don't think I could handle a season there because like the travel is ridiculous. Like luckily I was fortunate enough I played 3 games and the 2 away ones we played were our closest one, which closest by saying was 6 hours. So like our closest bus trip was 6 hours in Fayetteville to Macon, I believe. And like I remember the next weekend when I left, like I think you guys were going to Pensacola or something, and that's a long one. And I was like, oh, thank God I didn't have to do that. But that's, some guys like they love the game that much that they're willing to be on those buses for 15, 20 hours, and it's totally worth it to them. It's not about the money, it's just about the memories and the experience.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. Like those, and I think that makes you cherish the memories you have, like with the guys you had, because like again, yeah, you're not making millions. You're looking for happy hour everywhere. Like you know what I mean? Like that's, and like you said, the travel, the grind, the 3 and 3s, like to put like my body through another 3 and 3 where you play Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday afternoon, and possibly with some travel in there. Like all the respect to those guys and what we did, because there was times by Sunday afternoon you're like, and sometimes you're playing the same team 3 times in a row and you're just like just get away from me. Like I'm so tired of seeing your face. Like, but that's what it was. And again, still friends with, and we'll maybe get into it, but I got a group chat that still goes off to this day from when I played in Peoria, and it's like a daily group chat. Like we're still firing stuff over and stuff like that, and trying to get a reunion together. But that's how tight it was, because again, you weren't making millions, everyone's making the same, and you're having the same fun and whatever. But it's yeah, it's a grind of a league, but it's stuff that everyone's doing, so everyone's kind of in it together, I guess you could say.
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to touch on was also like the booster clubs of these teams. Like they are lifesavers. Like as you said, you're not making a lot of money, so like if you're there with maybe a girlfriend or a wife or kids or alone, it doesn't matter. But these booster clubs, these diehard fans, there's deals everywhere for you guys to get food. If you need something, they put together money to try to get it for you. I remember fans paying for my groceries and bringing all this stuff that they had extra just so like to help us out, and it's just like normal to them. It's like they get it. And like I wish that was more of a thing in Europe hockey, like especially in the lower levels, at least in Germany. It's it's not so popular as it is back there, but they really step up and help you feel like the money I'm making, okay, I'm gonna actually be able to save some of this because the booster club's helping you out, that way.
Yeah, it's like having a second family down there. Like I was pretty fortunate with all my billets, like, or sorry, booster families, I guess you can call them. But like some of them, I'm still, the ones I had in Peoria, the Stockies, like I'm still friends with them. They're little guy, or not so little guy now, but he came up to visit a couple summers. Like it was like that's I had them for a year and a half, almost 2 years and 2 seasons. And like, yeah, like I cannot thank them enough. And the ones I had in Fayetteville and stuff like that, like it's a, like you said, they're a lifesaver. They go above and beyond. And to be honest, it's not like, these are all people making millions of dollars either, right? Like they're hardworking people that have kids, and, they're buying them stuff, but then they're taking you out for dinner. And I don't think you realize it till maybe the end of the year, or you leave that team, on how fortunate you are to have people like that, and to continue to stay friends with them and stuff like that. Because like you said, like you're not making a ton, but for them to drop stuff off at your apartment or whatever, or help you out, or when your parents come into town and stuff like that, it just really changes the mindset, and it really helps, and it goes a long way. And some of those teams have unbelievable clubs.
One question I have is like, what kept you personally motivated? And what I mean by that is, obviously, your first year you win a championship, and then you go back your second year, still playing in the league. Maybe there's a thought in your head that's like, hey, like, maybe by Christmas I can get called up to the East Coast. I don't know. I'm just speaking out loud, but you're consistently playing in this league, and even at one point you went down to the FHL for a quick stint. Like, what kept you personally motivated to say, hey, like this is worth the grind, both physically and mentally?
Yeah, I mean, you're spot on. Sometimes I ask myself to this day why I, played so many years. But yeah, so after the championship year, I got invited to a East Coast camp, so that kind of gave me a little bit of taste. I went down to Adirondack, with the Thunder there when they had an East Coast team, and that kind of gave me a little bit of taste of like, can I make it? Can I not? They had a pretty good affiliate system, and it didn't work out. And then, like you mentioned, it kind of was a bit of a rocky start to that second year or first full year, I guess, for me. As I went down to Macon because I got picked up in the expansion draft. Didn't really see eye to eye there, and did enjoy my time there, but got released pretty much 2 or 3 weeks into the season where like every team's full at that point, and I'm like, okay, like maybe this is it. Like I'm just gonna, East Coast didn't work out. Now I just got released because of a numbers game, and now I'm just kind of like, okay, well, what do I do now? And yeah, like you said, I had a quick little couple weeks stint in the FPHL, and to be honest, if it wasn't for a buddy of mine, Bootsy Greenside up in Peoria, I reached out to him. I'm like, hey, dude, you guys got any spots? He's like, no, but like I'll talk to the coach or whatever. And the coach there knew who I was from their little Knoxville run, and he kind of like actually persuaded me to keep going. And he was like, listen, don't go home and sit on your couch or you'll never get a call back. So at that point, I was like, okay, I already trained all summer. Like I'll put one more year in and whatever. I'll just stick it out, sort of thing. And he just said, he's like, go down to the feds. I guarantee you'll be up in 2 weeks. And like, I was like, whatever, like this might be it. Like, so I go down literally there for 2 weeks, get called up for one game because a guy got called up from there. So I'm like, okay, great. Unbelievable experience in Peoria, like for one game, the rink and stuff like that. Get sent back down. I'm like, here we go. Like, it's going to be like this all year. And funny enough, that following week, got a call from, I think it was Columbus or someone, and they're like, we're in Peoria this weekend, we need a D. And I'm like, oh man, I don't want to start, I don't want the suitcase elite prospects to just start racking up here on 3 gamers. So I was like, you know what, Guy in Peoria was like, stick it out, you'll come back up with us by the end of the year. So I just trusted him, to be honest. I trusted his word, and I told those guys, I was like, no, like, you know what, I'm good, I'm just going to play here this weekend. I'm tired of kind of ripping around. And funny enough, 4 days later, that was on the Monday or Tuesday, I'm taking pregame skate in the morning in Danville, and coach pulls me off the ice. He's like, you're going up to Peoria for the rest of the year, pack your bags. So I was like, oh, cool. So yeah, so I went up that weekend, played against the guy that I told I didn't want to get called up, and yeah, that kind of was the story there. And yeah, that was, if it wasn't for Peoria kind of saving my year that year, I probably would have shut it down, to be honest, after that year. So my experience, year and a half in Peoria is still some of the fondest memories I have. We had again, successful team, and great group of guys. Like we still, again, that's the group chat we have of like that goes off daily with some characters in that group. But yeah, that was a tough year. It's a mental, like you said, it's a mental grind. Like you're like, why am I doing this? I'm going to get chirped. Like I'm up and down. Like, it's like, why do you do it? And like you said, it's not for the money. It's just because you love the game. And at that point I already had my education. So I was like, well, at this point, like, I'm going to be working for 40 years anyways. What's the difference? So.
After this grind, you decided to take the journey overseas, over to Europe. You signed in France and played parts of 3 seasons, France, Germany, and Sweden. What was your decision, kind of like the final decision there to be like, hey, like I've had enough of this of the SP, let's go try Europe and see what it's got to bring, and also just your experiences in the 3 different countries, because obviously France, Germany, Sweden, like these are not similar countries by any means. They all have their their quirks and their pros and cons, I would say.
Yeah, no, it's like you said, after North America, the grind, the bus travels, started talking to some buddies that were over there, like yourself, and actually where I ended up in France, a buddy of mine had just played there for a year. He's like, oh, dude, come on over. It's like 1 game a week. You practice, you get a day off in the middle of the week. I'm like, oh, sounds like a dream, like whatever, like, and the money ended up actually being better than the SP. And, I was able to go over with a couple guys I played in the SP with to France my first year. And yeah, the mindset was, I was hearing all these great stories about Europe, and I'd never been there before. So I was like, okay, well, free ride, free flight over. Like, why wouldn't I go? Like, try it for a year. Same thing, kind of was in the mindset of year to year at this point. And yeah, I went over to France with some buddies, and we lived in the same house together. And, it was a blast. It was to experience Europe for 3 years. Like you mentioned, 3 totally different countries. France, like, beautiful scenery, food was unbelievable, language was frustrating. Germany, you know, kind of an interesting, kind of ran with the money there. It didn't work out. And then, a year and a half in Sweden, which was kind of like North America. It was so incredible experience. Got to see some buddies when I was over there, kind of trains, planes, and automobiles, a couple of trips, but and a couple late nights with some dicey runs to the train stations. But no, I wouldn't give that up for the world. Like I probably would have regretted not going over to Europe and if I started working, because the friendships, the places I got to see, it's never, you can't put a price tag on that. And I've been fortunate to get back to Europe a couple of times now, last year for a wedding, this year for a big wedding as well. Not to name names, but maybe the host is getting married. So get back there. And, again, it's incredible how much I've been to Europe, and some people haven't even been in their whole lifetime. So
I tell that to a lot of people. Obviously you get to a certain point where you're not making the NHL, you're not making for Europe like the KHL or whatever, one of the top leagues, and it's more about just the experience, because I've always said the real world can wait, whether you started at 25 or 30. It's not really a big difference. You're gonna have these experiences in Europe of living in a country where maybe you don't speak the language, learning different currencies, different types of food, stuff like that. It's gonna, only help you going forward, and obviously like give you memories that are always fun to look back on. I wanted to ask, where was your favorite place you played, and where was the favorite place you traveled?
oof. Favorite place I put probably like my end of my career in Borås there in Sweden. Nice rink, nice facility, nice town, good fans, like did it right. Like that was the first time I probably felt like I was really like in a pro atmosphere, like the flames going off when you're running out onto the ice. Like they did a really good production. Actually, they just pushed for the Allsvenskan this year, which was pretty cool. They made a good little run there, and they're actually getting a new rink. But that was probably the best spot I played. And then visited. I don't know. Saw a lot of cool countries for like you kind of mentioned. They're all they're all unique in their own little way. And obviously, like I've been to Italy and Greece, and France was gorgeous. Germany was more North American style, but had the cool castles and stuff like that. I was fortunate to get to Austria, Czech. Like honestly, I think like you said, like I don't know if I have a favorite place, but it's they're all just such amazing, unique countries that it was probably more the experiences than the countries. But no, yeah, I had a lot of fun. And yeah, like obviously, yeah, the beaches. I'm a beach guy and water guy, so the Italies and the Greeces are up there. But even like Copenhagen, like I don't think anyone would ever travel, quote unquote, to a Scandinavian country, because it's all like Italy, Greece, Spain, like whatever. And I thought the Scandinavian countries were just as nice and like atmospheres and stuff like that than the other ones too, just different vibes.
Oh, that's for sure. You definitely, when you hear of Europe, you don't hear of going to anywhere in Scandinavia really, unless it's like, a quick layover or something. It's not as glorious as Italy or Greece, stuff like that. Yeah. So after these 3 years in Europe, you obviously decided to hang them up, retire, and obviously get into the real world. What was kind of your reasoning behind that? Because obviously, as you said, you played in Boris there, and you obviously were liked there and had been doing well.
Yeah, it's never, it goes back to the whole whether you play in the lower levels or the higher levels or whatever. It's never easy to just you know say you're done, right? And that's something that's I struggled with for a while. Obviously, a pandemic happened, and that kind of maybe pushed me in the. I'll never forget me, you, and Juice all calling each other, seeing how fast we could get home before this. At that point, we thought the country was shutting down. So, meanwhile, Sweden never shut down once. So, I mean, I could have stayed there probably the rest of my life. But I think that kind of pushed it a little bit. My parents are older. My dad's 72 and stuff like that. So, you do start to miss the Christmases and the Thanksgivings and stuff like that. It does take a toll a bit, especially in Europe where you're not a quick 5-6 hour drive home and stuff like that. One year I didn't even see my family for the full 8 months. So I think mentally it takes a little bit of toll, and just, it does come down to financials a little bit too, where, you want to get on with life and you want to experience, working and stuff like that, I had to get a run. Again, we go back to where we started this podcast in my junior, even midget year. Never would have thought I'd played till I was 30, right? So, life experience and stuff like that, I wouldn't change for the world, but I felt like it was time. And like I said, the pandemic kind of maybe helped persuade me a little bit. And, now I'm fortunate to be home and working and, doing all those things that I missed, like Thanksgiving and stuff like that. So it's bittersweet. As you know, we tend to live through our friends now and stuff like that. And, but again, we got buddies that have worked for 10 years before we ever did. And, they would change what they made to our life experience. So, wouldn't change anything for the world. And now, quote unquote, I tell people I'm in the real world working. So it's a grind. So take your time to get there. That's for sure, because it's not going anywhere, to say the least.
Truer words have not been spoken. I was gonna ask you if you ever thought you would have played as long as you did and the career you had, but you just answered that. So thank you for saving me asking that. One thing I was curious about too, you just mentioned your parents. So obviously, a little older, I would say, when having you and stuff. So how was their, support through all this, especially, when you were playing SP and then Europe as well? Because as you said, like there was times where you'd go maybe 8 months without seeing them. So were they always like very supportive of what you're doing, always trying to just help you enjoy the experience as long as you could?
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't ask for a better support system through, my parents and my sister. They sacrifice a lot, as we all know. Anyone that's played hockey, like the money, the time, 6 hammers, you name it, they did it all for us, right? And it was hard. Like even some of the times where I was kind of bouncing around a bit, I'd call my dad for advice, and he'd be like, his biggest thing and his advice to me was always like, get your education and then go do whatever you want. Like, get that education, get that piece of paper, and then go have fun. Like what else are you gonna do, right? Like you can't, you can't trade what my experiences were for money or that. So yeah, I can't thank them enough. And I think anyone that has a kid playing sports and stuff like that, I try and instill it in my guys now that, like, hey, like make sure you thank your parents, because like this stuff isn't given, it's not cheap. And like, at the end of the day, like, I picked up senior hockey a bit this year, and my dad was the first one at the gate, my mom was the first one at the gate, fortunate enough to play with my sister's boyfriend and stuff like that too. So, her coming out, my girlfriend coming out, like it was finally cool to see a smile on his face, and just, be proud again to come to the rinks and watch me play and stuff.
Doesn't matter what level. Like I try to tell people that so much, like as we've talked about at the start, like everyone's so caught up in on the, whether it's minor hockey with the three letters or yeah, I played first level pro in whatever country versus third level. Like it's, you know, you got to eventually think of what's more important, and it's about enjoying the experience. And I've said this before, like me personally, I wish I enjoyed mine more. I was always trying to think about the next step instead of enjoying where I was and being happy for that accomplishment that I had done at that time and point. Um, but yeah, now you've transitioned to the other side, so you are now head coach of the U18 Burlington Eagles AAA. I believe that would be midget if when we like back to when we were playing. But
Yeah.
a couple things about that, like how is it? Obviously, first juggling a full-time job and then obviously spending your nights, at the rink, whether it's for practice games, traveling for tournaments, stuff like that. And did you always plan when you were done playing, hey, I'd love to get into in coaching or stay involved in hockey?
Yeah, I mean, it's something I definitely want to give back to the game. And I had done, like, even when I was playing, I was helping out with this company called NF Hockey, and we are doing some stuff in the summer with little kids and stuff. And my last year as in Sweden there, I actually helped out with the J20 team, is what they call like kind of junior hockey over there. And they kind of allowed me to kind of, because I was like, what, I'm gonna get into coaching when I get home. Like, can I help out, sort of thing? And so I was just helping out with the older kids, and that's where I kind of found my love for like coaching older guys. Like I like to develop the younger kids with like skill development and stuff, but I like coaching the older guys because I can relate to them. I just came out of the game. I'm young. Um, so yeah, when I came home, obviously it was that pandemic year, so it was kind of a tough, tough intro to coaching where you're, one guy, one coach, 10 kids on the ice for a full 8 months. But kind of what I told people was like, if this is the worst case scenario, hopefully it's only up from here. So, yeah, I've been very fortunate. I started in Oakville with the Rangers there my first year with, as an assistant. And funny enough, a guy I met along the way, Corey Locke, got into the Eagles organization and said, "Hey, you're coming back over. You were Burlington Eagle. You're gonna coach in Burlington." So I said, "Okay, like I'd only like to coach a certain age group or a couple, U16, U15, U18, like those are kind of the older groups." And yeah, it all ended up working out. And then yeah, the whole juggling act is I'm fortunate that I still have a girlfriend through it all. But yeah, no, it's tough. Like you're working 9 to 5, the phone calls, the emails. Like I think the tough part is people are like, "Well, you're at the rink 3 times a week." I'm like, "Yeah, but the hours behind the scenes, like U18 now, we're pretty much at the rink 4 to 5 times a week. I still do skill development on the side. It's still a grind. It's just a different grind. It's the real world grind, I call it. But I wouldn't change it for the world. The rink's my happy place, and I'm fortunate that everyone around me understands that and allows me to do that. But again, you talk about support systems. If it wasn't for that, then if it wasn't for the people I have around me, I wouldn't be able to do what I do. And it's moving kids on from U18 to junior programs and stuff like that, or work, or we had a guy go D1 lacrosse last year. That's kind of the most rewarding part about it is, yeah, it's great to win trophies and stuff, but to see these kids come back to the rink and say, "Hey, Corbs, like, thanks for everything," and stuff like that, and parents, like, that's kind of why I got into it. Not so much for the championship trophies, is more for just helping these kids along the way. Because like we've kind of talked about, I had a unique path. I did a lot on my own, and now I'm just trying to get back and help those kids move on.
That's one thing that I think is lost along on a lot of people is, when everybody thinks of, retired pro hockey player goes into coaching, they immediately think, "Oh, so are you in the OHL or what pro level are you at?" Like they don't, I wouldn't say it's not as appreciated, but it definitely flies a little bit under the radar of guys like yourself who are, in the minor hockey system and giving back and sharing your experiences, your unique path with these kids and helping them, kind of guide them along the way to whatever they want to do in life, whether it's go CIS, NCAA, OHL, going to the real world after high school, it doesn't matter. Like, uh, you know, you're just as important, if not more important than pro hockey coaches, whatever it is, especially at this age too. I think, you know, you're coaching kids, they're 16, 17 years old, like they're getting to the end of their high school careers. Then like a lot of them, it's okay, so what now? Like, so I definitely appreciate, people like yourself who put all that time and effort in. And I'm sure that's what also makes it, rewarding, the sacrifice, the long hours. And I'm sure your special ones, like your girlfriend, see that it's not just an excuse to get away from home, maybe sometimes, uh but it's there's a purpose behind it. You have a plan, and you're putting that plan in motion.
Yeah, it's like you said. I think everyone, like I said, the most rewarding part is usually at the end of the year for me when the long texts start to come in from the guys you coached this year, and just thank you for everything you've done. And that's what makes the hours, the time, the phone calls, the emails, the practices, the late nights, all that stuff kind of um feel like you've accomplished something and you've moved guys on. And now I'm kind of, because I'm only in my second year now, I'm starting to see guys like have success at junior and stuff like that. And it's cool to be like, "Hey, I coached that kid," and hey, or like, like I said, the one guy down at Robert Morris for lacrosse, like, "Hey, I coached him in U18 and now he's playing D1 lacrosse," or I got guys that are, working. I just helped a guy get a job because I was a reference, right? So it's like, it's kind of cool to see the full circle of these kids. And um I think the misconception too is that all these people are like, "Oh, he played in the NHL, he can coach." Like if you can't relate to kids and you can't connect with kids, like you can't coach. And that's just, I think that's the misconception, is everyone, when they retire from hockey, they're like, "Oh, I'll just run a kids camp and make a bunch of money." But it's like, it's not about that. Like it's, like the best experiences are the ones that can connect with the kids and make, and tell their stories. And that's why, funny enough, our biggest quote in our dressing room at U18 is trust the process. Cause that was kind of my kind of upbringing, was just trusting the process, trusting in myself. And now it's kind of become a little bit of a theme for our program.
Yeah, it's definitely, for a lot of kids, it's not a race, it's a marathon. And like you said, like the perfect example is Wayne Gretzky. So greatest hockey player ever to play the game, could not teach, coach at the NHL level is obviously an extreme, but he did things at such a different pace, was able to understand the game in a different way that a lot of people couldn't. So I feel like his teaching techniques, didn't transition to the Coyotes at that time. And, as you said, it's having those skills to be able to, communicate while showing how to play the game, how to be, you know, a better human being first and foremost, be it preparing them for adulthood, stuff like that, and giving them a lot of life skills. I think that's obviously, something that goes a long way. It shouldn't just be about, yeah, I played 10 years NHL, so that means I should automatically get this job, or that means I'm going to be a good coach, as you said, etc. I wanted to ask you, so how has AAA changed? Like, obviously it's been 100 years since we played. I think like whatever, 17 years or whatever it is since we were in those systems. But how's how's the hockey changed? Like what are some of the differences you definitely noticed right away?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it's just like coming back into minor hockey. It's a whirlwind. Like the politics, I mean, now that I look back on our career, like we thought there was the odd politics, but like I don't think it's anything compared to today. Like, money talks and this and that. Like I think, like we kind of talked this whole podcast, like a lot of these kids, a lot of these parents, like they didn't have a lot of adversity. They don't have a lot of adversity in life. Like they kind of just get, and it's not that I, blame parents or whatever, but like they're just given everything. Like there's nothing earned anymore. Like you talked about, we slept on buses for 14 hours. Like it was a grind. And like these kids are like, well, why am I not getting first line minutes? Why am I not playing on the power play? Like, well, it's like, why should you? Like that's what I'm trying to really bring back, at least with my program, is that like you got to earn things. Like this isn't given. Like life, like you just don't get a job and don't show up. I had jobs, I had schoolwork, I had like the time management back when we think like everything was like structured. And now it's sometimes disappointing to see where the kind of the game's gone with all the people that are, you hear these stories, getting paid under the table and this and that, and what people are willing to pay. Like if like junior hockey, now we go back to that, like we never paid to play junior hockey. Now people are paying like 9-12 thousand a year for junior hockey. Like my dad would have told me to kick rocks and start working and get a paper route or something. Like there's no chance he would have paid 12 grand a year to get me to play junior. We didn't have the money. Like it wasn't. So like it's crazy to see like how much is around money nowadays and financials and stuff like that. Like I mean, like when me and you played junior, like we were given like sticks and skates and stuff and pads. Like it wasn't like we had to go out and like, hey, you get 2 sticks this year and that's it. You can buy the rest on your own. And you're like, I'm paying you 9 grand. How do I get 2 sticks? Like it's changed a lot. So I really try and bring back the grassroots, I guess, if you want to call it, of minor hockey when I remember. And back then, like you mentioned, I think, you couldn't get releases and stuff like that easy. Now it's like a wild west where like, I got my first email for U18 in like December of interest for like this year coming up. So it's turned a bit chaotic. I try and stay away from I try and just coach the way I was brought up, I guess. And yeah, it's a unique world to say the least now. And juniors, owned by a lot of parents. It's changed a lot, I think. And I just try and run my program like it was back when we played.
How's your this question just came to my head while you were talking. How's your like your scouting? So like your resources, because obviously, as you said, you're getting emails from parents saying, "Hi, my kid is interested in playing for your team next year. Whether he is ready or not, that's above the point." But are you like driving to see these kids to see them personally live? Are does Instat cover your leagues? I don't really know. Like, how would someone like yourself, give every kid, having the most resources for you to make a decision?
Yeah, I mean, it starts with, yeah, like you are scouting. Like I tell people all the time, like U18 is about as crazy as junior or as close to junior as possible, minus you can't trade kids during the year and you can't pretty much cut kids. Like it's like you're siphoning through emails, you're leaning on U16 coaches, like from other organizations, like, hey, this kid emailed me, like tell me about them, right? They just had their OMHAs, they just had their playoffs, like you're going to those, like you're again, that's what people don't see behind the scenes of U18. They think, oh, minor hockey coach. Like you're on the road, you're scouting, you're doing whatever, um, and stuff like that. So yeah, it becomes a big. Kids are sending video. We have Huddle, which is similar to Instat, but kids are sending you highlight clips, and yeah, it's. And me being a nice guy, I feel like I obligated to reply to every single email I get, even though I know a kid's maybe not ready, but that's probably where some of my time and effort goes in because I was that kid that was, I mean, you went through it a little bit too. We were shooting for the stars sometimes, emailing teams and GMs and stuff like that and getting no replies, right? So now that I'm on the flip side of it, I feel like I have to reply to every email or phone call I get. But yeah, that takes up half of your time too, right there.
Oh, we definitely we got a lot of reds, a lot of no replies, and honestly, being on the other side of it, I can definitely understand why we got ignored a little bit because you do get some ridiculous emails from guys thinking that they're ready for your league or this level, and it's they send you a 4-page essay on why they're ready, and I'm just like, look, like I'm sorry, but I
I
like
take
you.
essays.
I try to be, respectful and reply and be like, hey, like, I would recommend these leagues first, or we're full on this, like, just so they at least have an answer and they're not waiting in the
Yeah.
wind and they can kind of know like how it usually works in terms of the, like the depth charts, like moving up and stuff. But, yeah, funny world for sure. Um, like what's next for you then? So like, are you comfortable staying in this kind of U18 role? Do you want to maybe one day go up to junior, maybe higher, or are you have a good job, so you're comfortable balancing both your full-time job and then your second full-time job?
Yeah, I mean, I'm committed to come back here next year. I did have some junior interest at the end of this year in the junior B loop mainly, possibly head coach, possibly assistant coach, kind of up in limbo. But I don't know. I really like this age group, like you mentioned. It's I think I like this age group a bit too because it's not as business oriented as junior, where like it's you're not really you don't want to connect with the kids too much because they might get traded. You might have to cut the kid. Where like here, it's like I feel like I can kind of grow a bit more of a relationship with the kids and then help them kind of move on. And yeah, I mean, down the road, it's not to say that I don't want to move to junior or, I mean, I think the OHL is kind of out for me now, just with the travel and the pay there, and I mean, obviously, the sliding scale in the O, but just with where I am at in life and stuff like that, I think the only thing I would turn my head at, funny enough, would probably be youth sports because your 6 7 month job, you're employed by the school, you get a pension, you get benefits, like that's probably the only area I would look at with maybe some of the schools close by like Brock, Laurier, Waterloo, Guelph. That's probably where my head would turn if I had some interest there. But in saying that, I might they might want me at junior first before I go there, right? So I'm content here for now. Back here for another year, and after that, we'll see, kind of year by year.
Yeah, I mean, those school jobs, I've heard from many people, whether it's U Sports or NCAA, that if you're fortunate enough to have one of those and you can work your way up, like they're good jobs. And obviously, like last week's guest, like John Whiteley, who I played with, he's been grinding it for 7 years as an assistant coach, and as he said, you have to have a couple side hustles on the side, because it isn't a lot of money. But once you do get to that head coach status and whatever it is, then you do have a chance to be living pretty decent and be in a very comfortable position, controlling a program and how they build. But no, I mean, I've always said people sometimes think too far ahead, and you're living in the moment. You're doing a good job of what you're doing. You guys are having success every year. You're turning kids out. Obviously, you've found an age group, a place where you feel comfortable, you continue to do good work there. So it's, you know, don't don't change things when it's going the way it is. So I'm happy that you've found that place. And the last question I have for you, every week ask the guests the same thing. If you were to give yourself your younger self some, one piece of advice, called piece of advice for any of the younger generation listening, 16, 17-year-old out there, the kids you deal with every day, what advice would you give them when you look back on your experiences, your career?
Uh, to be honest, just soak it all in. Like you kind of said, like don't look too far ahead. Don't. I think the biggest problem now is kids compare themselves to other kids, like whether it's status or whatever. Like just enjoy your ride, and like we've talked about this whole podcast, everyone has their own path and everyone has their own way of getting there. And if you have the mindset that you're going to do what you want to do, then just worry about yourself. I think we're so caught up in society these days of comparing ourselves to whether it's work or hockey or whatever. I got a kid that stuck with me for 2 years and is now going to the Alberta Junior Hockey League, and he just trusted in the process. And other kids bounced around and went to junior, and but now, like me, like they're all ending up in the same spot. They're both going to the Alberta Junior Hockey League. Two different paths. One played junior B for 2 years. One played junior or U18 for 2 years, right? And he trusted. He tuned out the noise, and that's what I would say is just kind of soak it all in, do what you want to do. Tell your parents to just believe in themselves, in them too, because they kind of listen to the noise, and just kind of take every day with like it's your last sort of thing.
True words were never spoken. Corbs, I appreciate you taking the time, sharing your story, sharing your advice for everyone listening. And yeah, again, thank you. And I'll see you soon.
Always a pleasure, buddy. And yeah, I think we got some things up in the works here between the two of us. So it'd be good to have you back on Canadian soil, and then maybe take off for a little south trip before we go back to Europe. So I'm excited, and big things coming for you as well. So happy to be here and happy to be on.
Appreciate it. And for those who are listening, thanks again for taking the time. And until next week, cheers and ciao.